Okay, so that's a passage that we'll be going off or we'll be reading and then we'll be discussing. So it's First Kings 18, verses 19 through 39. I'm actually going to start it at 16 just because that's the beginning of the chapter and I feel like it's easier to do that, give it more context. So, okay, so Obadiah went to meet Ahab, and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and you have followed the Baals." Is Baals the right way to say Baals? Baals, I'm guessing. Baals. Does anyone know?
I different places pronounce it differently. I know like Bahal, but it's just like it just depends on like where you put the emphasis. But I think I know what you're doing.
The Baals is Baals. I don't know. We'll say Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent word throughout Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal, I really feel like I'm saying that wrong, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get two bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God. And all the people said, what you say is good. How far are we going? Yeah, through 39. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given to them and they prepared it. And they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears. Slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Sounds really depressing. Midday passed and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time of the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him and repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done all of these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me so that these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all of the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. So that was kind of a lot, but that was the story. So I'm guessing y'all have probably heard that story before. I feel like everyone, well, I don't know. So there are a couple points in that really got to me, but I'm going to go over some of the questions in here. So is there anything specifically that like y'all were surprised about through that chapter, or anything that caught your attention? Anything that showed like the specific question is there anything that over that encounter that demonstrated his faith, Elijah's faith, courage, commitment, and prayer to you specifically. And y'all can just take turns and jump in.
I feel like it really demonstrates his faith is like towards the end, where he's so confident that the Lord is his God and is the true God, that he pours the water on it over and over again, where it's like, it's not just a trick. Like there's no spontaneous combustion happening. Like it's in a power that, can, go against the elements in a sense to prove that he is the Lord, versus the others that were trying to worship people. They were doing everything right, supposedly, like the wood was dry and everything, so it should have worked. But Elijah's faith that his God was bigger, I think he just kind of put that extra challenge or there that to me demonstrates that his courage and his confidence through that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my favorite part too, but I'm gonna let everyone go first, because then I'm gonna say what I got from that part. Anyone else want to share any part that stood out to them?
I think it's the same thing, like a faith, like persevering through it. I think that he is willing to have patience and in the long run.
Yeah. So a couple of the things that were crazy to me, because I had read this story, but I don't think I ever realized these parts, were one, how much Elijah was just like punking them, like making fun of them and teasing them. I'm like, that's not, people are so sensitive these days. Can you imagine if someone was like that? They'd be like, they'd be in so much trouble for teasing. You're a bully. But that's kind of funny, because Elijah was taunting them, and they didn't even know they were being taunted. He was saying like, he's asleep, and then they were like, yeah, let's yell louder. But I mean, that's the difference between these fake gods too and our God. Is our God he doesn't sleep on us. He stays woke. No. Omnipresent. He's literally there all the time, and it has to be a fake God. Like a real God, it makes sense that he could be there all the time. But if it's a fake God, yeah, you probably think, yeah, he probably needs his rest, because can't do what our God does. That part was crazy. Sarah, what stood out to you the most in that chapter?
I think really just how brave he was. Like his bravery just stood out to me, because I think about like putting myself in a position like that, or like just saying so boldly, like, oh well, my God is gonna do this, and I'm about to show you right here, right God, like just so confident and brave to like say that. I was like, that really stood out to me, and it really encouraged me to be like more bold, or at least speak up more often, because I tend to not. But
I think that is a humility thing too. Not saying for you necessarily, but I mean, like for me, or I interpreted that from it, because if I were to say that to people, like, my God is going to do this for sure, I think I'd be nervous that if he doesn't, I'm gonna look dumb, and people are going to be like, I thought your God was going to do that. And then it's also sometimes hard to, ask things of God, or not demand, but like expect things of God, or say things are going to happen, because it's like, well, what if he doesn't want to?
right, like, is it aligned with his will? Like,
Yeah.
It's hard to not have like doubts, I guess, sometimes.
But I think the part that, or the reason why there was no doubt, is because this was strictly for the glory of God. Like there was no personal gain in this. He was like, I'm not asking for my gain. I'm literally asking God to do this because it's going to make him known to all of these people. And it's going, and I know that he wants to make his name known. So he didn't have any doubts, because he knew it was strictly for the glory of God. So I think like when that's one thing that stands out to me is when asking for things from God, it's like, okay, what am I asking? And my confidence of whether he's going to respond can also be based on, is this for his glory, or are there other things going on? Is this for my glory too? So, anyone have anything else they want to add?
I think that last point was really good. Like, it was like a pure intention. Like, he wasn't like, I'm not doing this to like survive like a stoning or something, or to get out of prison, or to wreak havoc in this land that I'm in. I'm going to show that the God that I personally have started building a relationship with is the one true God, and I'm witnessing to these other people in person, so that experience and know that this God is the one true God. So I think that was probably one of the most important things that I guess I didn't really like together until you just said it, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So one of the parts in that passage that I think the water, like pouring all of that water on the wood, is kind of, that's everyone's favorite part, or everyone's most surprising part. TJ in the background. Sorry. But so what got me about that was I tend to, in my walk with God, ask God for things that I feel like are likely to happen, or I can understand them happening, or it makes sense, or I can have some kind of control over it happening. It's hard for me to ask God for things that I have no control over and I don't think are going to happen. So a good example would be, I had my son, he's in the hospital, and I was praying. I was scared to ask God to bring him home before Christmas. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to say, like, I wanted to be praying, God, let him like come home from the hospital before Christmas. And I was really scared too, because I was like, the doctors already said that's not happening. They told me like middle of January, it's probably not going to happen. And I don't want to be praying for something and then have it not happen and feel like God let me down, or feel disappointed, or feel like in this like really dark season, I don't want any reason to feel like God's not like on my side, or like he's not there, or like he's not listening. And if I pray for that and it doesn't happen, then I'm going to feel like that. But it happened. He did not come home. I decided to, after reading this, I decided to start praying for it, because it's asking God for things that we don't think can happen without him is how we exercise our faith. If we only ask God for things that we think could easily happen, like if I ask God for there to be another cold day this month, well, yeah, I live in Texas. There's going to be a cold day probably in the next like 2 days. I don't know. And then a hot one too. So whatever, I can ask him for a hot one or a cold one, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. But asking God for something that is completely out of the norm, that's how we practice faith. And then even if it doesn't happen, that's when we have to say, okay, I asked for this, but if God didn't do this, and I know that it's in my best interest, and he knows the whole, he can see the whole picture. But we can't just not, and I can't just not ask him for those things that are scary. So then after Christmas, when I was like, well, he's not home, I've really been struggling the last couple of weeks, because I really wanted him to be home and was praying for it. But that's where I've had to just kind of sit in that. I'm glad that I asked for it, because I almost didn't. I'm glad I was praying for it. And now I'm like, okay, well, God must know, he can see something that I can't see. And so if my son didn't come home, he's going to come home when it's the right time for both of us. And I just have to trust that God has that he has a reason for it. So that's the part that really stuck out to me. So the next question, with all of this in mind, imagine if Elijah were sitting beside you right now. What are the top 3 questions you'd like to ask him about his memories from that day? So we can just all do one at a time if you want, or y'all can write down all 3. But if y'all think of them, you can just kind of share them. But what would be your 3 questions that you would want to ask Elijah?
Something that I struggle with is because I have a few like Muslim friends or friends of like different religions, and they try to convince me, oh, we're all worshiping the same God. But to me, I'm like, are we though? Like, and I think for me to know that Elijah had the confidence to kind of call out and put that to right then and there, because I'm sure the people believed that Baal was 100% the Lord their God, and that was the God in control of all of the blessings and grief and everything that they experienced. And who knows how generationally long that faith has longed for. So I think for me, it'd be a question of like, how do you have the boldness to really put your God on the test that you have a relationship with and you have seen things, but put it against the test of someone else's, version of God, and, come out confident with that. And even to the point of like what you're pointing out, like, I wouldn't want to mock. I probably want to like, oh, out loud, or he's like sleeping, and that have full confidence and witness in that sense. Like, I understand that there is some, like, you believe that someone is in charge of this, but this is not it. The Lord your God is. So I think for me, my question is like, how do you really have that discernment and boldness to go about putting God to the test? Because for me in my life, I do not like putting God to the test. Like, I will read his word and be like, yeah, your word is true. I don't need to, put on my sheepskin and test the waters 3 times before I figure out if it's true or not. But I think it's cool that he did. And obviously it's the moral of the story is evidence of that faith, that he was able to put God to the test. But I think that'd be my question is like, how do you have the confidence and the assurance to know that your God is the one true God over someone else's God that they believe is the one true God? Because in today's climate, at least, you would definitely get a lot of pushback and a lot of, religious debates about it. And for me, it's easy just to kind of like, you know what, I'll let you believe what you believe. This is what I believe, and then just move forward on our separate ways without like putting it to the test.
And it's interesting that you said that, and we could have a whole conversation about, we should talk about, because I've had a lot of experience over the last year, like in a lot of religious discussions with people of the Muslim faith. So I have a lot of interesting, we could have a good conversation about that. But there is a Bible verse, and it's Matthew 4:7, and it says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. And so that's interesting, because what we saw, it wasn't really like he was testing God. It was more so like he was setting up an opportunity for God to prove himself or to show up. He was more so creating not that God needed an opportunity, but it's like he was hosting an event. It's like, yeah, a concert. You can host the event, you can sell all the tickets, and you can prepare the stage, but the band still has to show up. So it was like he was creating this venue for for God to show up and put on a show. And so I think that that's something also, because when we talked about the intent of it and the purity of it being like just for the glory of God, so that people can see that God is real, that's a little different too than us testing God and saying like, okay, God, if you want me to date this guy, when I wake up in the morning, let there be a blue piece of duct tape on my door. Like that kind of, that I don't know that that's going to happen. I mean, you could try it, but that kind of, that's kind of like a test, like, okay, God, if you're real, or, so I think the difference between testing God, which we're not supposed to do, and what Elijah did is Elijah was just creating venue or creating space in his life to showcase his God instead. So, Kelly, any questions you would have for Elijah that you can think of? You're not.
I wasn't sure if it was like on mute. Ask him, I guess like how he like grew his faith, to like, to know going to answer like his prayer. Like we were saying, sometimes it is hard to like set aside, I guess, like your ego, or to put aside like your pride and to have faith and like asking for something crazy. Like if somebody had cancer and they were asking for healing, maybe, the doctors would say that there's like a 40% chance or whatever that they're going to be cured. Sometimes it's hard to to the knowledge that you have, like scientifically or whatever, and know that like it doesn't matter, like in the end, like God's love, and like God is above like anything that we can really explain. And I don't know, I think like it's easy to, because like people want to make sense of everything. So I would just want to know how like his faith grew to be as strong as it was and as like persistent.
Yeah. We'll see if Sarah gets back on. I'll do mine. So the 3 that I wrote down were, 1, did you have any doubts? Because I'm just curious to know if when he was asking that, if there was anything in the back of his mind that was like, man, I really hope that God does this. And I don't think he did, by the way that he taunted them and by the way that or maybe he did, and that's why he dumped the water. Maybe he was starting to second guess the whole thing. And then maybe he was like, you know what? This isn't about me. This is about God showing up and proving himself. So I'm going to make it even less about me. And I'm going to pour water on it so that I realize that this has nothing to do with me and everything to do with God. The other question I'd want to ask him is what it felt like when he saw that fire come down, because that's not something you see every day. I mean, just imagine standing there and you ask God to bring the fire down and you open your eyes and now there's just like this like whoosh, like comet coming down of fire and then onto the bowl, onto the altar. I mean, that had to be insane to see that. And I mean, I hope everyone was far enough away from the altar, because all that fire coming down, like, how did you set a perimeter around it? Like, tell it, I don't know. These people didn't think that God was going to light up the altar. So I wonder if a couple people got their eyebrows burnt off because they were like, nah, his God's not going to there's not going to be any fire. Then the other question that I wrote down was, what did your conversation look like with God when they were praying? So I wonder if that when he prayed and he said, he literally all he said to ask God to bring down that fire is he said, Lord, let it be known that Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant and have done all these things in your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me so these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again. And then the fire came. That's all he said. And so I wonder if when they were praying to their God, I wonder if he was pacing the floor like, all right, God, they really hope you're going to come through on this one. Is this the right thing to do? Should I leave now or should I stay? Or what, is there anything else you want me to do? Or I wonder if the whole time he was just at peace. And like, I wonder if he just knew, and just knew, well, obviously he knew that their God wasn't going to make any fire because their God wasn't real. But I wonder if he was questioning it or talking to God while they were praying, or I wonder if it was just like, all right, now it's my turn. Cool. All right, God, fire. Cool. Yeah, send it. Send it. Awesome. So Sarah, what questions did you write down?
Oh, okay. So I think I only wrote down one, but the biggest one that I had was basically talking like relational wise, like what kind of daily things did he do to like grow his relationship with with God to become where he's that confident in him, that his faith is so strong. So like I would want to know, what are the daily steps and the daily habits or the daily things that you did to grow this relationship? Because I feel like sometimes, I do a lot of daily things to connect with him, but sometimes I feel like I'll get into a routine of it and then I'll feel like I'm just checking something off on my daily to-do list, and I struggle with that. And I'm like, no, I want it to be like, I want to follow where you're leading me. I don't want to just create a schedule and follow what I'm doing. I want our relationship to grow in the aspect of just like he's completely like leading me and I'm not, or I'm just being like completely obedient. So
I think that even just having that concern is such a sign that your heart is in the right place. Because if you actually were just checking the boxes, I don't think you would be concerned that you're just checking the boxes. You having that heart of, I want our relationship to be spontaneous. I want it to be just you and me. I think that shows that your heart is in the right place. And at the end of the day, that's what God is after, is he wants your heart to be in the right place. And then also, if you feel like you get stuck in that rut, that's when you just change things up, like make things more spontaneous. Just like, I guess in a normal relationship, my parents used to have date night every week, a certain day. I think they still do. I think it's on Fridays, and they have their weekly date night. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. It's just like, I am going to make sure that I set aside this time for you because you're a priority. So we are going to at least do this. And anything else is just extra out of the overflow of love.
mm-hmm.
So I would be curious to know what his daily thing looked like too. But I think as long as, okay, what I'm going to set aside this time for sure. This is what I'm going to commit to, because God is a priority. And then anything else is like unlimited, whatever you want to do out of the overflow of love,
Definitely.
Anyone else have any other questions that they thought of that they wanted to ask him or would have wanted to ask him? No. So let's see. I'm kind of skimming over this Devo. So Priscilla Schreier, she's the author of this, so I'll read what she said. She said, as I think through the conversation I'd like to have with Elijah, I try to picture how he might interact with me. While I'd be zeroed in on all the spectacular moments of the story, I wonder if he'd intentionally point to other things, simpler, more foundational things, even difficult things that made up the underbelly of his journey with God, which is kind of what Sarah said, his journey with God. I wonder if he'd accentuate those quieter happenings from earlier in his life in passages preceding 1 Kings 18 verses that are filled with refining and pruning. So that's a very good point. He probably would focus on, he probably would be like, it wasn't just this moment. It was everything leading up to this moment that allowed me to have this confidence in God. So she said, these encounters leading up to Mount Carmel were precisely where the Holy Spirit seemed to shine a spotlight for me as I was reading. They captured me. They tell us that Elijah didn't just show up out of thin air knowing exactly what to do and how to do it. All that faith, all that courage, all that boldness and confidence in prayer, all that fire didn't just happen. Each of these impressive strengths we see in him have been fortified by earlier struggles, during earlier challenges, through earlier forays into trust and obedience. What she said, that last line got me, I underlined it. Each of these impressive strengths we see had been fortified by earlier struggles and challenges. That is the only thing that I feel like keeps me going when things are rough, is I know that whatever lesson I'm learning right now in these hard times, it's because there is going to be a time later in my life where I need this ingredient. I need to know how to handle this this situation, or I need to develop whatever skill or whatever callus I'm going to develop by going through this. I need to strengthen this muscle so that when I go through whatever the heck it is I'm going to go through down the road, I'm ready for it. And sometimes that is the only beautiful thing you can find in suffering, is there's got to be a reason. And maybe it's just I'm working a weaker muscle, and down the road I'm going to need it to lift something or to get through something. Anyone else have any comments before I continue? No. So this moment of biblical proportions high atop Mount Carmel followed a much less public process that God had begun in him years before, a process that is already happening in you as well, which your loving Father will continue to develop through this study, a progression of development that I hope you'll begin to realize, recognize, and value more than ever before, she said. So she said, yeah, I will go over this part too. I want to keep these to 45 minutes, just so y'all know, just so they don't take too much time. It's not too late. So She said, I'm assuming you're here with me in these pages because we both want what Elijah had. We want faith, courage, and boldness, a prayer life that pushes back the darkness, a character that possesses an unflinching backbone, a holy conviction that doesn't bow to popular opinion. We want to be brimming over with the fullness of God's spirit and power, brave enough to speak truth to authority with love and grace, singularly focused, inspiring others' allegiance to the one true God, and people who leave behind a lasting impact on future generations. Everyone on the same page says everyone wants that. Not literal same page because y'all don't have a Bible study, but these are incredibly noble aspirations. But the question for us remains, are we willing to do what Elijah did to get what Elijah got? Which goes right back to, I think, Sarah's question. What did he do? This is the next part of discussion. What excites y'all the most as you contemplate that question? Are you willing to do what Elijah did to get what Elijah got?
So it really makes me like fired up to read all that and to kind of go through this story, and it's super encouraging. But a lot of the times I'll be like, okay, God, like whatever you have for me, I'm gonna do it. Like I'm gonna be obedient. I will drop everything, like just, yell it out to me and I'm your servant. And then like he'll tell me to do something. I'm like, wait, you want me to do what? Like, and I'll just stop and I'm like, and then I get scared and I'm like, well, let me just wait a week. Let me study about this. Like, let me just do these other things when, right then and there in my prayer life, I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. So I think, what was the question? Sorry.
What excites you the most about that question? Like, are you willing to do what Elijah did to get what he got?
Yeah. So I guess just to follow up or just to tie it in, I just think, maybe just deepening my prayer life and asking for the courage and also like doing things like this really helps, like getting together like in community and having friends that really can pour into you and encourage you. So like if you feel like you have something from God and you're kind of scared and you're like, oh, I don't know if I should do this, then you can like ask your friends or ask the people who are going to like pour life into you and support you and just tell you like, you got this, because you need that in your life. And I think God really gives those people to you. So it's just really exciting stuff.
I'll actually change the question because Sarah kind of answered the second one too. So what excites you the most about that and what scares you the most about that? Because Sarah said that, I'm guessing you said that the things, having to do the things that you don't necessarily want to do when God asks you to do things you don't want to do. So that's probably that's the part that scares you the most.
Yes. Yeah. I'll feel really confident in the moment. And then I feel like he'll put something on my heart. And then I'm like, ooh, like, what are people going to think? Or, all the questions that come into your head.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really just leaning on your support system is super important.
Yeah. Anyone else? What excites you the most and what scares you the most about doing what he did to get what he got?
I think it's exciting because sometimes like it's easy to get caught up and maybe feeling overwhelmed by a challenge or a certain situation that you're enduring. But then like being like this story, like it reminds you that no matter what you're going through, first of all, like you always have like God on your side and always reach out to him in prayer and know that there is like a reason. So like you were saying, like he is like growing you or developing you for a greater, I think at the same time can also be that's like the most intimidating.
Yeah.
And knowing like as a believer, there's going to be like, there's a lot of people like out there that doubt God's truth, and knowing that like, knowing that you're going to like expect to have to confront like that doubt from other people. But at the same time, like there's like a peace in knowing that like we'll always persevere and that things will always happen in his time, regardless of like other people try to push onto you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Destiny?
Yeah, so I think the thing that's exciting to me is that in order to do what Elijah did, it's a daily, commitment. And even if it's like, when you work out, if you skip a day, it's, that's just one day, but that person or God is still there and that relationship is still going to grow because even if you didn't set aside time to read your Bible that morning, like, you know, in the back of your head that he's omnipresent and that he is sovereign over all things, and you can see how he works in just the small daily things. So I think the cool part is, or what fires me up is, it's the daily things. It's the very small things that most people overlook that Elijah didn't, you know, to build that relationship and to grow to the point of when this huge miraculous opportunity came to, like, in front of him, that he was able to handle that, you know, confidently, because he, you know, took the time to do those daily things. Now, if he had fear in the moment or doubt in the moment, who knows? But it's evident that he didn't let that trump his faith, like, bottom line.
Yeah.
And thing. So regardless of what his own maybe insecurities or doubt might have been in the moment, that's not what's written down. What's written down is it was his exercise of faith and his strength that he did to edify himself through his past experiences that came to the opportunity that brought all these people to the Lord, or at least brought them to the opportunity to get to know the Lord and the fullness of his glory through everyday faith. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know what scares you the most? Because you talked about what excited you, but is it just?
I think it's like, once you do get up to that peak, you know, once you're like, you've done all the steps, you're there, you're spiritually mature enough to, you know, be bold and have the confidence to, you know, battle your giants or whatever your obstacle might be. But when you get there, are you going to play chicken? Are you, like Sarah said, are you going to kind of like, I don't know if this is the right opportunity. Maybe there's someone else more bolder or more spiritually mature than me that's going to come up and handle this? Or am I the one, whenever I look around, there's no one else? And will I play chicken and back up away from the problem, or will I face it? I think that is the problem that scares me the most, is a lot of times whenever it does come down to the wire, I feel like I lack that confidence, mostly because I don't ask for the Lord to substitute his confidence through me. So I think it's more of like a mindset, because I know I'm prepared. I know all the right things to say a lot of times. And if I don't, I let the Holy Spirit use me. But I haven't put myself in a position enough to where, once I have this, you know, cross section or something that I can really be doing to let the Lord shine, I often play the chicken role, and I'll keep my mouth shut, or maybe like message someone privately, like, hey, I didn't speak up in the moment, but here's all the information that probably could have helped you make that decision, or whatever it was. And so I find a lot of regret in that, is like, maybe I didn't say what I should have said, or that was an opportunity and I let the Lord down because I didn't speak up. That's often where I find, like, that's where my disappointment comes, or my discouragement comes in a lot of those situations.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that. So the things I wrote down, what excites me the most is being pushed further in my faith and having the confidence to ask for things that are completely out of my control, and things that, because like I said, like, it's hard for me to want to ask for things that I don't have any say over. And so I just love that that's the thing that excites me the most about doing what he did, is just developing that ability to ask for things and know that it has nothing to do with me. And that's kind of ties into what you said too, but I think that's the hardest part too, is knowing, like, or asking for things that, and knowing that you're putting God 100% in control of the situation, and it's something you have no control over. Like, I want to be able to do that, because I try to hold on and control things. And the part that scares me the most is looking dumb. Like, I don't want to ask for something, and then God, or, you know, be bold about asking for something and then God not show up, and then feel like he wasn't listening to me, or feel like I didn't ask for the right thing. And that's the other thing that scares me about it, is, do I know God's heart enough to know that what I'm asking for is truly his will? Like, am I asking for this for his glory, or am I asking for this for my own comfort? And I want to know his heart enough. So I think that, that's also the scariest part of doing what Elijah did for me to get where he got, is really having to learn God's heart. And I think that you have to put yourself out there, and you have to ask for him to show up in times where he might not, and you think he might not, because even if you don't see him show up when he's present in those situations, it just might not be how we wanted him to be. So, all right. Well, we're right about that 45-minute mark. So, does anyone, that's pretty much all for that. I think, yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to touch on. And so if anyone has any prayer requests, feel free to share them or put them in the chat. And we'll just close out in prayer. If y'all have anything specific y'all want us to pray for, just drop it in there. Or let us know. Let me know. No one has anything specific? Okay. All right. So I'll just pray us out. Lord, thank you for this time that we got to spend together, reading your word and just spending time with other people who love you. God, I ask that you would continue to increase this desire in us to learn more about you, to learn your heart, to do what Elijah did, and to have that fervent faith where we could literally stand up in front of a group of our peers, or even worse, our enemies, and ask you to show up with complete bold confidence that you're going to. God, I just ask that we would put ourselves in uncomfortable positions where you have an opportunity to show up in our lives and prove who you are to the world, and that we would be your vessels to do that, and that we would have a blessed week, and everyone would stay safe and healthy, and get healthy. If they're not, cough, cough, Kelly. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Well, cool. Well, it was good seeing all of y'all. So we'll do these every Wednesday night at 7:30 Central Standard Time, which in Kelly time is 10:30 a.m. on Thursday.
10:30.
On Thursday.
Okay.
But everyone else can do the math on the Central Time. So feel free to join. I think it's a different link every time, but we'll always post it on the Modest Muscle Instagram in our story. So, and we'll probably always send it in the group chat too. So, all right. Y'all have a great rest of your night. It was good seeing everyone.
Good to see you all.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good night to you guys.
Have a